Hey, okay, so today let's continue on to lesson 5 in the book. And up until now, we've been dealing with all of these percent questions and percent increase and decrease stuff by using our algebra from module 3. I've been showing you how to set up equations and then like solve for the variable, and we get the answer that way. And personally, that's the way I would do these questions, but there's another really good way to think about how to do these types of questions, which will really like test your ability to like manage some numbers in your brain. And I think this is a really good sort of like brain growth exercise of trying to do these questions in this way. And so it all relies or kind of circles around the factors of 100, which I'm going to refer to as the manageable chunks. Manageable chunks. I kind of feel like maybe I just spelled that word wrong, but whatever. Manageable chunks. And I call them manageable chunks because, well, they're manageable chunks of 100. All of the factors of 100 are kind of easy to build the number 100 from. And if you're able to do that, then it makes a lot of this percent stuff like kind of easy. I don't want to say easy, but let's say more manageable. So let's list the factors of 100 real quick. You got 100, you got 50, you got 25, because 25 times 4 is 100. I'm not going to list them all out like they want here. And then I think the next one is 10. And so 10 times 10 is 100. Nope, I accidentally skipped one. My bad. 20 is also a whole number factor of 100 because 20 times 5 is 100. And then I think I was supposed to go to 5 because 5 times 20 is 100. And then the next one would be 4 because 4 times 25 is 100. And then lastly, you got 2 because 2 times 50 is 100. And so if you're dealing with some numbers, if you can figure out what 50% of it is, or 25%, or 20%, or 10%, then you can sort of build 100% from there pretty easy because you just multiply it by this number over here. And so when we do that, when we find like 25% or 10% or 20% or 5, whatever, I'm going to refer to that as the manageable chunk. So let's try doing like 3 questions using this strategy. Probably still going to need a calculator along the way, but we'll see. So example 1 says, the 42 students who play wind instruments represent 75% of the students who are in the band. How many students are in the band? Okay, so 42 students is only 75% of the class, so there must be more than 42 students. If I had to throw a guess out there, I'm going to say like 50 something, 52, 54, 56, 58, somewhere in there sounds about right. So let's start by making a number line that represents the students in the class. And so, well, you could have 0 students, and you could have all the students, and then somewhere at around wherever 75% would be, which I guess is right around here, we know that this is 42. And now we could make another number line to go with it. And this one's just going to represent the number of students in the class, but as a percent. So if you had 0 students in the class, that's 0% of all the students. And if you had all the students in the class, that would be 100%. And we know that the 42 students is supposed to represent 75% of the students in the class. And now let's see if we can take these 2 numbers and get a manageable chunk to work with. So I want to know what is 2% of the class, or what is 4% of the class, or 5%, or 20, or 10, or 25%. Because if I can get information about one of these percents, then it's really easy to figure out what 100% must be just by multiplying by its like paired factor number over here, or its multiple number. So if we know that 42 is 75%, well, we can't really figure out what 50% is from there. That would be kind of hard. How do you go from 75% to 50%? You can, but it's harder than we need to make things right now. You can, however, get to 25% kind of easy from 75%, because 75%, that's the same as 3/4, and 25%, that's just the same as 1/4, right? Or in other words, if you know how much 75% is of something, you just divide by 3, and you know how much 25% is. And so we just do the same thing up here. Let's take this 42, let's divide it by 3, and we'll know what 25% of the class is. So I could do that one in my head. I bet you probably can too, but let's do this. 42 divided by 3 equals 14. So you can see that, 14. So 25% of the kids in the class must equal 14. Now it's fairly easy to take that information and figure out what 100% of the class must be, because we're just going to multiply by 4, right? If we want to go from 25% to 100%, we just multiply by 4. And so let's do the same thing here. Let's take this 14 and multiply it by 4 and figure out what the whole class would be. And that's what I mean by manageable chunk, right? If knowing that 25% is 14, that's a chunk of the whole class, and it's super manageable because it's easy. You just multiply it by 4 to get the answer. And so anytime I talk about a manageable chunk, I'm usually going to be talking about one of these multiples. That might not always be true, but manageable chunk just means like find a number or a percent that's easy to work with. So I guess we should finish this, right? We got to do 14 times 4. 14 times 4 equals, it was right in that range that I guessed. It's 56. So I'm going to write 56 over here by all, where I put on this number line, and we'll write the answer. There are 56 students in the band. We could have also solved this question by just going, well, 42 equals 75% or 0.75 times all the students in the class, which I could just use as the variable a, and then solve this equation by dividing by 0.75 on both sides. And if we did 42 divided by 0.75, we should get that same 56. We do, but I'm just trying to show you a different way to do these types of questions, right? So this would be like an algebraic, pull out your calculator and do a decimal division or decimal multiplication type of thing. And this is more like, can we use our brains in a super smart way to like manipulate the percents to make the numbers easy to work with? And the ultimate goal, which we'll work on a little bit later this week, is to be able to do questions like this in our head, because we can do this manageable chunk stuff in our head. All right, let's do another one. It says, Bob's Tire Outlet sold a record number of tires last month. Cool, good for them. One salesman sold 165 tires. How are you going to sell 165 tires? Shouldn't they be in multiples of 4? I guess people get flat or whatever. Okay. Which was 60% of the tires sold in the month. What was the record number of tires sold? Okay, so let's do the exact same thing we did on the other one, right? I'll make two number lines. One that represents like the actual number of tires, and then the other one that represents like the percents that are happening. And we'll use that to sort of match things up. So this one will be like actual tires in just regular numbers, and it'll go from 0 to, I guess it's supposed to be the record number of tires or whatever, right? So this will be the record. And then 165 tires represents 60% of this record. So 60%, it's a little bit more than half. This looks like half to me, so we'll put it right about here. 165. And now let's make another number line that represents like this same situation, but in percents. So you could have 0% of the record number of tires, and you could have 100% of the record number of tires. And we know that this 165 represents 60%, right? And so this will be the percents number line. And so now let's see if we can put things in terms of a manageable chunk and finish the question that way. When I go back and I think about the factors of 100, ideally I want to have one of these percents going. It doesn't always work out that way, but so I'm looking at these and I'm like, I know I have 60% to work with right now, right? Which one of these manageable chunks is easy to get to from 60%? I can't really get to 25 from 60. There's no good way to like divide or multiply 60 and get 25. I could get 10. I could divide it by 6 and get 10. But just because I'm thinking ahead, I realize I could also do 20, right? Like it's just as easy to divide 60 and get 20 as it is to get 10. And 20's bigger, so maybe that chunk will be easier to work with. I don't know. I actually don't know which one of these is like better or if they're the same in this case. But I'm going to go with 20 just off a hunch. So my goal is to turn 60% into 20%. So let's see here. If I wanted to mark off the percents on this number line, let me go in 20% chunks. That means 40% should be like right around here. And that means that 20% should be like about here. And then 80% would be like in the middle between 60 and 100. And if I wanted to go from 60% to 20%, right, from here to here, I have to divide by 3, right? I hope this feels a lot like our proportional relationships and equivalent ratio stuff we did at the beginning of the year, because really that's all it is, right? Like this stuff is really just proportional relationships, but we're just always dealing with the number 100 as the percent. Anyways, so that means that if I take this number 165 up here and I divide it by 3, then I'll have whatever 20% of the record is supposed to be, right? So let's see here. Let's do 165 divided by 3 equals 55. Man, the lighting in my apartment's so terrible. All right, so we got 55. Now, it should be relatively easy to answer this question because we know that 55 tires represents 20% of the record number. And if we have 20%, well, you could probably do this in your head, but we could go back to our table here. 20 times 5 equals 100. So let's just multiply that number by 5. And that means we have to have the record number of tires, right? So I already got my 55 on my calculator. I'm going to multiply it by 5. I get 275. So that means that the record number of tires sold was 275. And I'll just write a little conclusion here. They sold 275 tires. Yay, good for them. All right, let's do one more. It says, Nick currently has 7,200 points in his fantasy baseball league, which is 20% more points than Adam. Ooh, this one's going to be a little bit different, a little trickier. Okay, how many points does Adam have? So let's see here. There's a reasonable chance I'm going to mess this up. Let's do it the same way we've been doing it, where we'll make one number line, and this is going to represent, well, I think we want it to represent Adam's points, because the thing that we're trying to figure out is all about Adam's points, not Nick's points. So let's make it about Adam's. I don't know if this is going to work or not. I might wind up scratching some stuff out here and starting over. I don't know. And I know how to do the math in my head, but the number lines might get all weird. All right, so let me put an apostrophe here. It's Adam's points. All right, so I suppose Adam could have 0 points, and we could get, if we called this like 100, this is actually how much Adam has here. Well, the only number we have to work with is Nick's points, which are actually beyond how much Adam has, right? He has 20% more. So we have to like continue on and sort of like guesstimate where 120% would be, right? Like if from here to here represents a whole 100%, And then an additional 20% is like another fifth of this line. So maybe like this long. And so this is going to be Nick's points. And this is going to be 7,200. And now if we make another number line that goes along with this, right? So we'll call this the points percent number line. Then from here to here, well, this is if you had 0% of his points. This is 100% of Adam's points. But then to continue on to where Nick's at, it's actually 120%. All right, and what we want to do is we want to get a manageable chunk. We want to have a number on this percent line that's easy to turn into 100. And so if we go back to our manageable chunk list, the factors of 100, we know that the number we have to currently work with is 120%. We could try to get that to 50, but that's not easy. Going from 125 to 50, there's no good way to multiply or divide that. There's no good way to multiply or divide to go from 120 to 25. But you can kind of easily multiply or divide 120 to make 20 or 10, right? If you wanted to go to 20, you would just divide by 6. If you wanted to go to 10, you would divide by 12. Last time I chose 20. How about this time we choose 10? Okay, so I'm going to try to make a 10% chunk. So then that means I have to mark them all off, right? So I'm going to just sort of eyeball some stuff here. Let's call this 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. The last one's got kind of big, but whatever. All right, and so this will be 10%. This will be 20%. This will be 30%. 40. We won't fill all these in when we actually go to do this, though. In fact, I'm kind of sort of being extra right now, but whatever. It's all good. All right, so if I want to make 10% from 120%, then I just need to divide by, you should be figuring this out in your head before I say it, I need to divide by 12. And so that means if I want to get an actual number that represents 10% of Adam's points, I need to take this number and divide it by 12 to get what should be like right here. So let me put a little mark there. This will, it's not quite straight. I messed that up a little bit, but whatever number goes here represents 10% of Adam's points. And that's going to be 7,200 divided by 12. 7,200 divided by 12 equals 600. Okay, so 600 is 10% of Adam's points. Should be relatively easy now. We got a nice manageable chunk to work with. We take that 600 and we multiply it by 10 because it represents 10%, and 10 times 10 is 100. I believe we get 6,000. So that means that Adam has 6,000 points. All right, and I'll write that right along here in the middle. Adam has 600 points. Boom, we did it. All right, and it's not as short as the last one, but at least it's under 20 minutes. All right, see ya.